Joining us on the line are the co-writers, producers and directors of the film Who Killed British Cinema. We're joined by Robin Dutta and Vinod Mahindru. First things first, how are we, Robin?
Oh, doing good, thanks.
Good. And Vinod, how are you?
Yes, very well, thanks. Just keeping warm.
Very cold out, isn't it? Now, first things first, the film itself is absolutely fantastic. How long was the kind of project in the pipeline for? I'll start with Robin.
It was kind of an on and off project, and it was kind of a pet project of ours. We started noticing things wrong, I think, around 2006. We started picking up that things weren't quite right, especially in our region. There's so many times we think that we wanted to make a documentary. We started looking at accounts and paperwork and then realised it's not really what we do. We're not really that kind of investigators. So we kind of put it on the shelf, and then something would happen and it would get me angry, and then I would say to Vin, we just need to go and start interviewing local filmmakers. And then that's it. Come 2010, when the UK Film Council announced its closure, that was it for us. Then we just started picking up the camera, going out, and let's start talking to filmmakers.
And of course, the film heavily exposes some of the work the UK Film Council did.
Yeah, we started looking at the regional screen agencies first, and then from the regional screen agencies, we kind of soon realised, as a documentary, not many people would probably be interested in looking at a specific region. Then let's look at the rest of the UK, and we went to the UK Film Council, and then we thought this is going to be a bit of an expose from our point of view, just to highlight what stuff that's already in the press, but people don't really notice.
Now, Vinod, obviously, it's something that is highly referenced in the film, is that it's very difficult now for British filmmakers, in particular independent filmmakers, to kind of get any exposure or start their projects off. How did you guys find it when you started off? Was it kind of telling how difficult it was to start a project like this?
Yes, I mean, the actual process of starting a filmmaking project is actually exciting, and it's actually invigorating. A lot of youth and young people, now that we have digital access, will find that process a lot easier than during the filmmaking process when it was 16mm and 35mm. So the activation of the project is the fun part. But what is challenging is getting the project seen. That's the real question which UK film policy hasn't really addressed, and it's one of the real key themes in Who Killed British Cinema, which is that if British ideas, and there are plenty of great innovative ideas, especially amongst our youth today, are activated and are able to be made, how can they be seen? That's the real question.
Now, of course, the tagline of the documentary is the documentary they don't want you to see. Have you felt that it's been largely ignored by people who kind of don't want to address these issues head on?
Yeah, we took the film to Cannes when it was still work in progress, and we had loads of sales agents and people talk to us saying, why are you trying to, bite the hand that feeds you and you're putting your hand in the lion's mouth? They kind of told us that early on, no one's going to want to take this film on board because you're just pointing something out so that people want to try and ignore. Like, there's so many things that people try to highlight in the film industry, but this is such a substantial issue, especially within the UK. Like, we had a screening with VEC2, the Film and Television Entertainment Union, recently. It took 2 years for them to put up a screening. It took them 2 years because the BFI were not helping them or aiding them at all in trying to screen our film. And then the guy who was in charge, Tony Lennon, actually turned around and announced why this documentary was called the documentary they didn't want you to see, because he actually lived it and experienced it. They were trying to restrict him from showing the film. Now, the thing is, this type of film, people have to see it, so they just at least know where they stand when they do want to make their own films. Millions of pounds can be given to someone to make a film, but the problem is, as Vinod said, if you don't have access to the market, you can't get the film to the cinema or to your audience, it's absolutely a waste of time. You're giving that money because you're knowing it's going to fail.
And aside from in the film industry, how have you both found the reception to the film more generally? I've seen online there's quite a few of the reviews are very positive. You, of course, are on George Galloway's show, Sputnik, and also on Talk Radio. How have you found the reaction from the media towards the film?
I think so far it's been quite positive. I mean, people, when they watch the film, can see that there is a case to be made about the fact that there actually is no British film industry, contrary to the mainstream press, who certainly during award season will spout the idea that there is a British film industry. When you actually dissect it and analyse it, as I said on the recent Sputnik programme, that it's very rare for British ideas, British locations, British sensibilities to actually be seen on the cinema screens in general from all the regions in the UK, of which we have a whole host of them, not just London and Liverpool. It's very rare, and so in that sense, we don't really have an industry that actually showcases our experience.
Like, this is the other thing as well, Henry. We got contacted by millions today, really early on. So I'm talking about mainstream press. My experience with the mainstream press has been really negative because they don't want to cover our story at all. Yeah, like BBC Business today got in contact with me saying that they wanted to do a story on us about the film, and they asked us what the premise was. Well, once I told them, they said, well, we need to counterbalance that. What other films are being made in Birmingham? So I was like saying, well, that's the point. There are no films being made in Birmingham. So then they started contacting me and contacting other filmmakers saying, are you making a film in Birmingham? And no one was. So I was trying to say, well, isn't this the point of our film? So they weren't allowed to do the story because on the basis that there was no balance. But the fact of the matter is, even the BBC are getting finance from, for programs like The Hustle. They're getting public money to shoot that in Birmingham and make it look like London. And then they're saying that it's helping the economy where, okay, they're paying for a few hotel bills and a few restaurant bills and hiring a couple of runners. All the production people are generally coming from London. So again, the mainstream press, I can absolutely come out and just call it, they just don't have the courage to exploit or to say what it is that we are saying, because the whole system's a massive cash cow.
Also, Henry, just remember the quote that really that real change can only come from people who are crushed by the system. If you're working for an institution like the BBC and it pays for you to sort of follow the line, then you're not going to be really that interested in something that actually subverts convention.
And of course, when you watch the film, a lot of the kind of statistics that come up are very shocking. And you do think, how the hell has this become the case? Now, in the opinion of, yourselves, where did this start? Because I know there's a few mentions of, for instance, the introduction of the Film Council by Blair or some of Thatcher's policies. Where for you two, because I've seen in the book you put the kind of cross is that the film industry died in 1983. Why is that? What was the policy in that year that kind of kicked this all off?
Well, it was the end of the quota, the ED levy, officially abolished in 83. And so that's why we use that date as a sort of milestone for sort of like the end, if you like, because once those levies were taken away, it really made it impossible for British films, British ideas, British decisions to really have any say in what they wanted to be made within our shores.
And it's like the quota system, but we introduced the quota system in the UK in 1927 because the Cinematographers Act, it was Britain who came up with it first. We'll have a quota system. The proportion of indigenous British films have to be shown on the cinemas. And this was back then when we only had cinemas with 1 or 2 screens max. Now we've got cinemas with 12 screens. John Gore from Warwick University is also in our film. We've talked to him about it. He said to have a quota in his system wouldn't be a bad thing. But this is a thing, it has to happen in stages. We have to reintroduce a quota system so indigenous British films that young filmmakers make have an opportunity to go to the cinema, have an opportunity to sit in front of the audience. But we need then the marketing and the budgets to tell people that these films exist. And we also really need to redefine what a British film is. Because at the moment, I don't know if you know much about the tax credit system. It's so convoluted, and you have to do 2 weeks post-production in London, and they'll get some money because they say it's classed as a British film. But it's all foreign investment. It's basically who distributes the film is the one who makes the decision, and when the money comes from, and where the money stays or where the money goes. If it's done from America, then the money's going to go back. The money has to stay here and come back into the system where young filmmakers have an opportunity to make another film.
And of course, that policy in 83 isn't the only thing in the documentary that's exposed that has contributed to this decline or the killing of British cinema. People might think that this is a group of people who don't particularly like Thatcher and they're just opposing that. It's not the case at all. You obviously oppose a lot of the things, for instance, Tony Blair did. What are the kind of problematic policies do you think that Blair introduced that have contributed to this?
I think with Blair, it was more of appeasing what was going to be okay for business, So, in other words, if Hollywood as a business is going to bring in jobs and bring in potential employment by making films like Star Wars in the UK, that was good enough. They didn't really identify the cultural importance of having a film policy that reflected the UK's cultural values and the UK's cultural representation and the UK experience. And ironically, it's actually the UK and the English language within our shores that is incredibly interesting to people abroad. It's incredibly interesting and very marketable to people from other countries. And it's a complete dereliction of duty for that to be ignored. And if you look at, say, an idea by J.K. Rowling, which was about Harry Potter, which is all British, that really should have been made by someone that was going to be investing in the future of Britain, if you like, because all that money's gone to Warner Brothers. And that really should have gone to within our shore so that we could reinvest and make another 100 films on the back of that. And yet America have exploited British ideas, and we've allowed that to happen through government policy. That needs to change if we are serious about having any sort of UK film business.
For me, Henry, it's more about regulation. I think we needed more regulation. So what they were doing is they were operating on trust. So they'd give millions of pounds to this organisation or that organisation to be in charge of distributing and having, for screen and filmmaking and all these skills, trainings and courses that are available. There's loads of courses that are available. But then the reality is what's going to happen after you finish those courses? There was not enough regulation to when these funds were going out and films were being made, and there was no accountability. Absolutely no accountability whatsoever.
Now, if we go back to the start of the film, it obviously starts with a fairly long warning from Sir David Lean after he's sitting down accepting an award. I think it's in the early 90s. His warnings, how many of them have come true, does it seem?
All of them. I mean, I think that it's quite prophetic, and it's quite ironic because I actually remembered him giving that speech live on TV as I was on the cusp of going into film school. And it always resonated with me, and obviously it all made sense once I graduated from film school, what he was really alluding to. And, I think any serious up-and-coming British filmmaker they don't have to take our word for what we're saying, but I'm sure they'll take David Lean's word. He was talking from knowledge and real experience because here was a man that understood cinema emphatically. Here was a man that was completely immersed in what cinema was and how important it was for our identity. And he was making prophecies, if you like, in respect of making films that were only about instant gratification or making just sequels just for the sake of pandering to a pre-existing market. For Britain to take itself seriously, it has to invest in new ideas. Those new ideas should be made and decision made within our shores for there to be a sustainable growth of films and ideas, because the French have always had a quota system which has enabled them to produce filmmakers, new filmmakers and new artists. And as they point out in our documentary, it takes decades to build that. If we had a quota system tomorrow, it wouldn't mean everything would change. We'd still need a couple of decades for it to bed in.
You mentioned earlier about Harry Potter, of course, not really being a British film. There's other films that people, I think, would associate with being British films, things like Notting Hill. Would you argue that these films, therefore, aren't British films? And what, in your opinion, so people can kind of broadly understand, what classifies exactly a British film?
A British film, essentially, is a film that is owned and distributed by a British studio. And the British studio is an entity which has money and finance and decisions that are indigenous, and all the profits are reinvested within the shores that they're invested in. So in other words, the British studio would make films and all the profits would then be put into further projects. We don't have one single British studio within Britain, which is quite shocking, really, when you think that we have the British film industry, yet there's no British film studios.
Because people would argue that Pinewood's a studio, but Pinewood's just four walls. Anyone can go in with money and hire it. So it's like a warehouse, soundstage, But you need a proper film studio is vertically integrated to generate the idea, to actually see box office takings, right? All throughout, the whole procedure throughout is owned by the studio. Again, the key thing is the decisions are made by people from this country rather than Hollywood.
Do you think the issue is that people aren't really aware of the problem? When they see things like, and I mentioned earlier, Notting Hill, Harry Potter, they associate them with being British films, and therefore, when they see a campaign like this, they think, oh, well, this is nonsense because we have British films, whereas in actual fact, it's just not the case.
That's a very, very good point, because that's essentially the smokescreen. It comes across that we do have an industry because there's these British talents that work on these so-called British films, but all the monies and all the profits and all the sensibilities are American. And whilst characters like the Hugh Grant character in Notting Hill exists in Britain, it's not the only thing that exists in Britain. We have what I call tourism films made by Hollywood executives, but they're not actually British films. If you look at our writing talent in the UK, going back from, Chaucer to Dickens to Shakespeare, the variety of ideas that we come across, that we are able to put on paper, is immense. That should be translated on the cinema screen. We should be extending upon that with the new medium cinema. And yet we have basically mortgaged all of that to Hollywood. We've given it to Hollywood, which is a travesty.
Now, the film itself features, some absolutely fantastic people. So Ben Kingsley is in it, Ken Loach, Jonathan Gems, Mike Hodges. I mean, when you started making this film, did you have any idea or any kind of expectation that you'd get such wide support from such key people within the film industry?
We sent out literally hundreds of letters from people like Ian McKellen and Emma Thompson and so, who were really encouraging and really supportive. Even some of them were a bit cautious about being on film to talk about it because they understand the way the industry works. Especially women struggle a lot in the industry, so if they come out and be outspoken, they have to be cautious. They're not going to get any more work.
Yeah.
But again, we were just as surprised when all these people were getting back to us. When Kenneth Branagh got back in contact with us, I was over the moon. I couldn't believe it. I was thinking, hold on a second, I've got a subject here that I think is speaking quite loud to them. And we were talking from a real ground level, from like short films to just little TV pilots, proper small screen stuff. And these guys were talking, we were so indicative of the industry as a whole. We were just as surprised as everybody else when they responded to us.
That must have been such an endorsement for your project to have these key names kind of coming out in support.
Definitely. It was an endorsement. It kind of highlighted that it wasn't just coming from disenfranchised filmmakers like ourselves. It was also coming from people who had experience within the industry itself, where they weren't in charge of what scripts were put in front of them. And in order to get work, they would have to resist or hold out for potential projects that appealed to them, or just do what came their way. And a lot of the time, they weren't really artistically fulfilled. fulfilled by what Hollywood had to offer.
We had tons of footage. Our first cut was essentially about 7 hours long.
Oh, wow.
Of the documentary, because we had so much footage. And so in terms of DVD extras, we have absolutely tons of DVD extras that we slowly releasing one at a time, and it's going to become a learning resource in the future. Like, we had people like Ian Smith, phenomenal producer, and people like Tony Klinger. Just seeing them with an hour or 2 hours is more than I learned at university about film and media. I don't think I've plugged this, Henry, if it's all right. If anybody wants to buy the film or watch the film or buy the book, they can go to whokilledbritishcinema.com, or they can go to Amazon and buy it from there. There's also VOD there. We've got a couple of bookstores hopefully starting to stock the book. Hopefully people can have a look and make a decision for themselves. The film in itself is just a warning to young up-and-coming filmmakers and media students that this is what you're going to have to potentially face.
And the DVD itself with all the extras is a must-watch. It's absolutely fantastic. Final few things before we let you go. You've mentioned, obviously, people involved in the film so far, and two people I wanted to kind of pick up on. First things first, the MP, Sir Gerald Kaufman, of course, who died last year. What are your kind of lasting memories of him, for instance?
He was a very interesting man. People would regularly see him on the South Bank. He was a genuine film lover. I mean, he really loved films. To meet him was a real privilege, and he was very accommodating to us, even though he was obviously an MP at the time and he was very busy. But he kind of highlighted to us how the cinema business doesn't have a free market. We don't have access to the market. That the whole setup in respect of cinemas is essentially owned by Hollywood. So therefore, it's monopolized the audience output. The audience don't get the range of choice that we hoped multiplexes would bring. And unless you live in a place like London where there's a diverse range of different types of cinema, so you can watch a diverse range of films, most people are going to be sort of subjected to limited choice, which fails the audience.
He kind of understood straight away what we were talking about. I refuse to believe that people in those positions don't know what we're talking about. They'll start talking about, well, you had the old quota quickies and you had problems with the kind of poor films being made. But, out of 100 films, you're lucky if 10 of them are going to be good with any industry. But again, going back to Gerald Kaufman, he knew exactly what we were talking about, and he was happy that we were highlighting it. Like, I've just uploaded a clip about him talking about Harvey Weinstein. He was talking about how, even though he didn't like Harvey Weinstein very well, Harvey Weinstein at least cared about film. So again, clips like that we've got, the mainstream media or all the other media just will not highlight. It's probably one of his last interviews. Because if they highlight that, then they'll probably have to highlight the film.
And the other person I wanted to get a few words on, John Gore from the Warwick Arts Centre here, which is directly opposite our studio. What was the kind of help he brought to the film?
John was someone that, in respect of the Warwick Arts Centre, he had a real understanding of how difficult it is for an intelligent film to be marketed and to be seen by an audience. He was someone that, obviously being relatively local, had knowledge of how the bureaucracies were really failing innovative, new, and you could say dangerous ideas. They were really only pandering to what I'd call safe bets. If you look at what David Lean was saying in our documentary from the start, what we need is bureaucrats that were really genuinely interested in taking risks with new ideas, new scripts, a diverse range of people making films, so that, people have the potential to grow, and then people have the potential to hopefully see these films and make up their own mind. The problem that was happening in bureaucracies is something that I'm sure John Gore is very knowledgeable about, which is that you don't really take chances because you don't want to, because you're on a salary that pays you very handsomely and you don't want to take risks. So the audience lose out, and, small cinemas that want to show innovative films find that they're out of fashion. As Alan Parker says in our documentary, it's a bit like fast food. People become so used to a certain type of film that their attention span and their ability to concentrate and their ability to see a layered, interesting, clever film is lost on them.
You mentioned the Harvey Weinstein thing there, and understandably that's kind of brought the whole Hollywood film process into review. There's a part in the trailer and the film where Jonathan Gem says, "I'm quite pleased that I'm not in the industry anymore, otherwise I wouldn't be allowed to say this." Do you think the film industry is now coming to a point where we can seriously kind of review it? There's going to be serious exposure on some of the practices that go on there, and it's kind of almost our last chance to save British cinema? Or is it dead already?
That point that you make is also first to the BBC as well, which is one of the main institutions in the UK. When you look at going back to the Iraq War, the only person who got fired after the Iraq War was the Director General of the BBC. Now that can't be right. When you look at people who have been endorsed by the BBC over the years, it's quite obvious that there's something very wrong in these institutions for such people to be heralded. And you mentioned Harvey Weinstein. I mean, he was heralded, winning awards, all this kind of thing. And so questions do need to be asked. Who are these people in high places? Who are these people making key decisions on people's futures? Who are they and what are they really doing? Are they film people? Do they really care about film? Or are they self-serving? Are they mercenaries? We need to make that decision that we want genuine people in respect of film if we want there to be a sustainable film industry.
See, Henry, I don't think it will change anything. And, we're talking about offshore here and the whole sex scandal thing that's going on with Harvey Weinstein and their executives. Again, no one's naive. Everybody knows that the casting couch has been going on for years. So the fact that it's being highlighted now, it's like a zeitgeist of the moment. Last year it was, we need more black actors. Next year it'll be something completely different. We need to have more child actors. I have no idea. It could be anything that they think of. We need people who understand the cultural sensitivity of and the impact of cinema. So Halloween, we never used to celebrate Halloween. We never used to have American football team. The cultural shift is phenomenal that is happening in this country, and people aren't really picking up on it or realizing it. And I think cinema has a massive impact on that, especially American cinema and American culture. So until that kind of stuff isn't highlighted, I'm not sure if anything's going to change. Like, you can go into the BFI now. The BFI are in control of the British film industry, and they're still not under the FOI. To find out how much of the salaries they're on. Jonathan Ross is on their board. What's Jonathan Ross doing in film?
Yeah.
It's all token gestures.
Celebrity culture as well.
Yeah, it means absolutely nothing. Matthew Vaughn, who directed The Kingsman and is a phenomenal producer, he's gone on record and said that we don't have a British film industry. It's a Hollywood service industry. So these sex scandals and stuff that we have aren't really going to make any different or any major shift. You watch the Oscars. Fantastic film that Martin McDonagh has made, The Three Ebbings. It's an absolutely beautiful film. Yeah, so I'm hoping that's going to win Oscars and so on. And then you watch the British press saying it's a British film. That is not a British film. It's ridiculous and absurd to call it a British film, because just look who the distributor is. Yeah. Where's the money going to go? Gravity won Outstanding British Film at the BAFTA, because they filmed in London. It's ridiculous.
You wouldn't say Apple was Chinese, because it uses Chinese workers. It's an American corporation. So, it should be the end of the argument, really.
I've got to be honest, it certainly is shocking. And if you're listening to this and you're thinking, I don't know too much about the situation, but I want to find out more, you've got to watch the film Who Killed British Cinema, because it's absolutely fantastic. You can get it from their website, whokilledbritishcinema.com. The film itself is absolutely fantastic, and of course they've got a book out as well. Robin Dutta, Vinod Mahindru, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you
Henry.
so much. Cheers.